Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee a sculpted image, nor any manner of likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down unto them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God.
Oh, wow. This may be a God of love, but God really hates sculpture. And paintings, and photos, and movies, and posters, and action figures, and stuffed animals, and even those little glow-in-the-dark stars. Basically, Star Wars and its associated merchandise. For generations, centuries even, we have been taught that because of this second commandment, that Judaism is an iconic religion and culture, that we aren't allowed to make or enjoy images. One thing that is true of all Jews is that there is no one truth about all Jews. Jewish culture is, in fact, many cultures. Our religion has almost infinite expressions and versions of religiosity. So, when it comes to art, it's completely fair to say that God prohibits lifelike imagery and also doesn't. Jews have never had a complete prohibition on images, especially non-human renderings of birds and animals and the stars in the heavens, like at Kahal Adath Jeshurun, the museum at Eldridge Street, or even like the arc wall or in the ceiling in our sanctuary right here. Lest you take the second commandment literally, I want you to know that there has never even been a universal prohibition on sculptures in Judaism. Not even those with human features. This isn't late-breaking news, no 20th or 21st century innovation. Torah itself includes descriptions of incredible sculpture. Starting 2 weeks from now, when we meet Bezalel, arguably the first artist in our tradition. It's his duty to create, among other things, the ark for the tablets inscribed with these very commandments, including, "Thou shalt not make unto thee a sculpted image." And to crown that ark with sculpted figures of the heavenly seraphim. Pretty sculpted looking to me. How are we to harmonize these seeming opposites? A God that hates art, and a God that loves art, and wants the greatest works of art in God's own Mishkan, in the Holy of Holies. We could bend ourselves into pretzels trying to square those circles. I think that's too much metaphor. But even Maimonides pretzels himself. Oh, we'll get to Maimonides. The Mishnah first takes the pretzel approach. These rabbis in the first generation after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in the 1st century CE tell a story. Proclus, son of a philosopher, asked Rabban Gamliel in Akko when the latter was bathing in the bathhouse of Aphrodite. He said to him, "It is written in your Torah, let nothing that has been proscribed stick to your hand. Why are you bathing in the bathhouse of Aphrodite?" Now, warning, there's some artistic nudity about to flash on the screen. A rabbi in a bathhouse with a Greek goddess. How could he possibly explain himself in light of both the first, no other gods, and second, no sculpture commandments? He replied to him, "I did not come into her domain, she has come into mine. People do not say, the bath was made as an adornment for Aphrodite. Rather, they say, Aphrodite was made as an adornment for the bath." Okay, I think I get it. It's not worship if she's already there, in a place that Rabban Gamliel already finds himself in the course of his daily activities. And the sculpture itself is okay because it's just decoration. Totally logical. I would expect a different response from Maimonides. He is the king of the incorporeal God, the God who can't be captured in a human-made image or even really be pinned down in our limited mortal words. And yet, even Maimonides pretzels himself to harmonize the conflict between text and lived experience. He wrote, "One who worships idolatry out of love, for instance, he coveted a given image because it was made superbly beautiful. If he accepted it as a god, he is guilty of an offense punishable by stoning. But if he worshipped it because of love for art or because of superstitious fear, he is guiltless." That's the end of the quote. Maimonides, whose 13 principles of faith include that God can't be described. Even he gives art the thumbs up, if it's beautiful. So at least on principle, he couldn't hate this sculpture of himself in Cordoba. Judaism as a whole embraces many conflicting versions of God. We have a God of prescriptions and proscriptions, a jealous God who visits the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generations. We also have a God of love and comfort, whose Shekhinah, whose indwelling presence, accompanies us in our moments of physical and emotional exile. We have a God of the strong hand and the outstretched arm, who stretches out a wing to protect us. And also the opposite, a God of incorporeality that can only appear on earth as a voice or a pillar of cloud or fire. Judaism makes space for all of this, even when it seems to be in conflict with itself. No big surprise, this is true of Jewish art as well. We have art that would please the God that hates imagery, like the Mosaic floor from an ancient synagogue at Tel Rehov in Israel. Rather than images of trees and fruits in the land, this mosaic presents rabbinic texts on the halakha, the regulations of planting trees and making offerings of fruits. And from the same era, we also have synagogues with Greek zodiacs at the center of their mosaic floors, as at Hamat Tiberias, just a half-hour's drive north of Rehov. This could only have been made for a God of art and images, and even astrology, which are all actually very Jewish pursuits. In 3.5 weeks, we will celebrate Purim by reading from Megillot Esther, Scrolls of Esther, which might contain only text, like this brand new one for sale on worldofjudaica.com. Or we might read from spectacularly illustrated versions, such as the late 18th century Italian ivory Magilla in the Jewish Museum in London. Like the Zodiac mosaic, this illustrator borrowed allegorical characters from the surrounding culture, including little putti, or cupids, seasonally appropriate, and a personification of justice holding her scales. Appealing to our spiritual sides, let's also consider a couple of painters from the modern era. Mark Rothko, who immigrated to the US from Russia, wanted his paintings to activate and nourish a viewer's soul. He wanted his canvases to connect us with God. The God from this week's parashah might approve of these paintings, created for a place of prayer, the Rothko Menil Chapel in Houston. That same God would disapprove of another Russian emigrant Marc's paintings, Marc Chagall, who worked in France and the US. But these canvases might be more spiritual viewing for many of us. With his dreamily romantic images of people and places, Chagall also wanted his viewers to connect to something larger than themselves in the universe. The imagination it takes to envision people flying over one another in a shtetl is akin to the imagination it took to sculpt a heavenly being that looks like a human with wings, as Bezalel will do for the Ark of the Covenant. Parashat Yitro gives us a God that hates art. Parashat Truma in 2 weeks will give us a God that loves art, a God whose power catalyzes and embraces human creation. God is defined by structures and laws and thou shalt nots this week in Parashat Yitro. But somewhere buried beneath thou shalt not make a sculpture, I can still see the glimmers of a God of beauty, the God of creativity, the God of art, the God of joy, the God of love. This is the God that I choose to embrace on this Shabbat. Which God do you?